everyone. I'm Cameron, and we are reviewing part 3 of the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Marcom. I'm here with Paul, and part 3 is all about unpacking just 4 spiritual disciplines or practices for unhurrying your life and ultimately leading to that place of abiding. So, Paul, are you excited to get into part 3?
Yeah, that's the practical stuff.
It is.
The
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
The first practice that he starts with is silence and solitude. And after reading the book, that was the one that I decided to start with. And he says it's by far the most difficult, but also the most important spiritual discipline, because without that place of silence and without that place of being apart and being alone with God, we don't really get to grow. We don't really get to hear what the Father's saying to us, and it is really key. But in the same way, it's probably the most rewarding, and I found it the most empowering practice that I've enjoyed. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, so you read this, and then I've also been doing a life coaching course through John Maxwell team. And they talk about how self-awareness is like the greatest, like the secret to life. Self-awareness, kind of, I can't remember exactly how they state it, but you cannot be self-aware without having silence and solitude. I find if I take time to just to sit and just to be silent, that is when I start to process my responses, my reactions, how I'm behaving, how I'm treating other people, how I'm thinking, all of these things. It's just taking out all the noise and taking out even my own noise that I'm creating, my justifications of my actions, and just letting them be fully exposed and vulnerable before me and before God. So I think that's the place, that silence and solitude places where you get to be completely vulnerable before God and before yourself. Yeah. And because there's nothing to hide behind. That's the point. I think that's the point of this discipline, is you have nothing to hide behind. You are essentially naked before God, and you're going, okay, everything is exposed. What needs to change? Yeah. What do you, like you say, what are you saying? And there is genuinely no practice, because even in those times is when scriptures that you have read 1,000 times start to come into your mind, and actually the truth of those scriptures start to be opened up and revealed, and you start to go, actually, yes, I need to actually not just read that, but apply that into this situation. And so, yeah, this is something that, like, for me, like going for walks and just every opportunity that you have in the day to take these moments is absolutely like key and life-changing, So it's not just creating these lengthy times, which is important, but it's also being able to just implement them into your lifestyle, like taking every moment that you can throughout the day to just start to be silent before God. And it's actually amazing how it shifts. Like, you start to repent for things that you didn't think you needed to repent for. Like, there's all sorts. I need to actually say this to this person. I need to appreciate this person. I don't just need to think about this person and have these thoughts about them, but actually express that to them. And God, you actually start to see, God starts to speak to you even about others. And what others need in these times. Like, it's honestly, it's becoming self-aware, and someone who is self-aware can become aware of others. Yeah. Someone who is not self-aware is so absorbed in themselves that they have no capacity to be aware of others. So it's a big one for me.
It is. I think the easy part of it is it's easy to switch off the outside noise. Like, you can turn off the music, you can turn your phone off, you can turn down the stereo or whatever. but the big challenge that he points to is the internal noise. Like it's the inside voice, the hamster on the little wheel that's running inside there going, wada, and spinning the tune. That's the inner narrative that you're telling yourself. And to quieten that is probably the more difficult side of the discipline. And but probably the most important thing is when you can just say, okay, just be calm, like shut up already. Just I want to hear what you have to say, Father. I think that's the key to it. I think the other thing that's profound about it is that Jesus did it, guys. If Jesus needed time to be alone and quiet, then who the heck are we to think we can't? So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah.
It's like if we want to follow Jesus and Jesus did it, then we should be doing it.
Yeah. And you can't say I want to follow Jesus and then say, but I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like in order to follow Jesus, you have to do what Jesus did. And this is one of the main things he did. Like, so you neglect this, you neglect following Jesus. Simple as that.
And it's a good study to do. It's like, how many times do you see Jesus disappearing into the wilderness? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like the desert. It's a quiet place. It's a place that's alone. It's it's just a place free from distraction. I think that's probably the key to it. Yeah.
And if you want to see the world through God's eyes, this is how you do it.
That's exactly.
It's like it's stopping, and just all of a sudden everything gets filtered through. Okay, no, what would Jesus do in this situation? How would Jesus perceive this? What does Jesus want from this? You know, like it's in my own experience, that's where that happens.
Yeah.
More than anything else. I can read the Bible and I can be busy reading the Bible.
Because you've got other things going on in your
Yeah, and I've got other agendas for reading the Bible. I've got a sermon. I'm ministering this weekend. This is work.
Yeah.
Silence and solitude. The only people that are going to benefit from our silence and solitude they'll benefit from who I'm becoming.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not saying don't read the Bible, but I'm saying the reality is like it is a spiritual discipline that transforms you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I think it gives you it's that whole thing of giving your soul a chance to catch up and to be refreshed.
Yeah.
And I mean, oftentimes people talk about inner healing, and there's a whole bunch of emotional health tools that get you to process. But the healthiest place to come out of it is to hear what the Father says about you, because you can uproot all of the lies the enemy's spoken about you, but unless you get the truth replanted into your hearts, like you're never going to transform.
Exactly.
It's always going to be like weeding, but the enemy's just going to be throwing some more seeds.
Yeah.
So I think that time of being alone with the Father is key to getting those seeds of truth planted back in the heart. So what's the next practice there, Paul?
Shabbat, I believe.
Shabbat. Shabbat and Shalom. Yeah? Have you watched The Chosen?
Of course.
Series, yeah? Shabbat Shalom. It's funny. I was saying that to Eleanor. Like it was how they greeted each other. Like how crazy is that? Like Shabbat.
That's how central it was to their
rest,
being.
delight, and Shalom, and experience His peace. I think that's the invitation. And I must say, when I first thought about Sabbath, I was like, oh no, it's under the law. It's Old Testament. We're not under it anymore. But when you see how Jesus and how God describes it in Exodus and Deuteronomy, it's like, guys, I'm blessing this thing. I've blessed the Sabbath for your benefit. and then how the Pharisees just missed it. Like they turned it into a legalistic exercise. But how 40 years later, when Moses is writing Deuteronomy, he reminds them again. He's like, guys, observe the Sabbath because you were a people who were enslaved, but now you're coming into your promised land. It's that whole thing of remembering where you came from.
Yeah.
But so you don't forget and enjoying and delighting in your freedom that you're in now. Because to be honest, it's a difficult thing. I think I've quite nailed Sabbath right. I don't know how your practice is, but I must say I'm still an infant in getting it right.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it can be, if we're honest, it can be tricky with like family and whatnot.
With kids.
So it's definitely something that you've got to do as a family unit. You've got to embrace it as a family unit, you know?
Yeah.
But when it's sometimes your only day in the week to actually get certain things done, like the realities of our lifestyle kind of hit home.
Yeah.
But I think it's just I think everything requires intention, you know? Like it's like, I see the value in this, therefore I'm going to lean into it. And so it's the little things. It's delighting in creation. It's seeing. It's actually. I think a key to Sabbathing well is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because if Sabbath is about enjoying the presence of God, practicing the presence of God, Psalm 100 says, enter his gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise. And so for me, thanksgiving and praise are a major part of enjoying the presence of God, you know?
Yeah.
And so part of, what John Mark talks about, what Dallas Willard talks about, what Pete Scazzero talk about around Sabbath are delighting in God's creation. So what is this awesome... The Sabbath grid, is this rest and worship?
Yeah.
Anything to index your heart toward grateful recognition of God's reality and goodness. And so often if we went for a walk along the river here, it would literally be just honestly listening to the wind, looking at trees, looking for birds. Like it would be the simplest things and just breathing in those things that reflect who God is, you know? Like family moments when the kids are laughing together. It's literally just recognizing the goodness of God in every one of those moments and not being too busy to do that. Not being too busy to recognize that. So if there's one day in the week, so this is how we should be living our lives. But if there's one day in the week where you go, today I'm going to be more intentional about this. And it's Walter Brueggemann, I think, who said, those who live the Sabbath, the one day a week, you know, they do that properly. They live all 7 days differently, you know. But if we can be more intentional on the Sabbath, on one day, it's going to change how we live the other. Yeah.
It has to. I think it forces you to stop and realize that, oh wow, all of creation speaks forth God's glory.
Yeah.
When you're so busy, you're missing the simple joys of the birds and the trees.
Exactly.
And we live in a city, but there's a little bit of nature around.
There is.
Where we get to enjoy. I think the other thing he says is that the Sabbath is almost a resistance to the culture of the day, where everyone's going 24/7. And if you're a Christian businessman and you decide, well, I'm closing my business one day of the week, like you'll get mocked by the current business community because well, you're losing a day of earning extra income. Yet God honors it. And then if you look at the Israelites, like they didn't just have a Sabbath one day a week. They then had like a 1 week a year where they just took the whole week off, and it was like 8 days of Sabbath.
Yeah.
Just complete resting. And I think like the whole thing of Sabbath is that it didn't start with man, it started with God. And God rested after creation, and then he spent time with man. Like that was his seventh day rest and delight, was enjoying his creation.
Yeah.
And I think if God sets the tone for it, maybe we should be paying a little bit more attention to it. I don't know. It's profound. And that whole concept of how he blesses the Sabbath, like we see him blessing the animal creation, the animal kingdom. He blesses mankind and says, be fruitful and multiply, and then he blesses the Sabbath. So like 3 things that are called to be fruitful and multiply. There's clearly some reproductive blessing in the Sabbath, in that it reproduces life in us, and that where we've poured out throughout the week, we get to be refilled and restored. I think that's probably the benefit that we're missing out on. The other thing that he mentions was that population group of Seventh-day Adventists in Southern California that live 10 years longer than everybody else in America because they are religious about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And like he worked it out. Like I think it was exactly the number of Sundays over a 70-year lifespan equated to 10 years extra life. So
Wow. Yeah.
kind of scientific proof, guys. If you want to live long and prosper, like maybe listen to God's word and enjoy the Sabbath.
Yeah. What is it? To stop and to delight, joying in God and our lives in His world. Like I think this thing of stopping, like you said, it's for us to stop means that we are realizing that we are not Alpha and Omega. It doesn't start and end with us. We are not the source. Like the world continues to twirl around the sun. Like when we stop, life on earth continues. Yeah. We are not making everything happen. And so part of this, the discipline of Sabbath is actually the acknowledgement, just as tithing is an acknowledgement that everything, He is the source. These are disciplines that actually position us to say God is in control. God is God. I am not.
Yeah.
I exist because God exists.
Exactly.
He does not exist because I exist. Like I find my purpose. I find my life. It's in Him I live and move and have my being. And Sabbath is stopping and going. It's sometimes a ruthless, like a radical. Putting my foot on the brake.
Yeah.
There are things that are going to have to fall by the wayside and sacrifices that will have to take place in order to do this. But this is a statement that God is actually God of my life. And I am not my provider. I do not have to work 7 days a week in order to make it through.
Yeah.
God will get me through. I think that's also... And I can't remember if that's not in this book, but that's, I think, in The Great Omission. It's putting God where God belongs. He envelops us. We are found within Him,
Yeah, I also find it's kind of a way of saying, enough. Enough is enough, guys. In this world that's constantly telling you want more, you need more. Sabbath is kind of like a statement of saying, actually, no, I've got enough.
Yes.
It's the one analogy he uses is that of like a governor, like on a car where it governs the speed. And it's kind of like a governor on the speed of life.
Yeah.
Just giving you a understanding of what restfulness kind of looks like and slowing things down a bit just to say, we don't have to go full throttle 7 days a week. We can take the foot off the throttle and just stop. And it's also in a world where everyone's going 24/7. It's almost a statement, and I think Brett and Claire would appreciate that. But it's kind of like scheduling social justice into your calendar and going, "Hey guys, we're not a people who." And it's remembering that like the Israelites were a slave. They were slaves. They grew up in a culture of slavery because they were the slaves, allowing an empire of Egyptians to live in luxury and have pyramids and have amazing palaces. And a Sabbath is almost a resistance to that empire. Going, we're not of that same thing. And we live in today in a culture where there are 30 million slaves that are making our clothes and supplying every woman need, even if we don't acknowledge it. And we're saying, well, I don't know a slave. Like, they're there, they're just in the background. It reminds me of old Dave Batstone's book, Not for Sale, where he's a professor at San Francisco University, and he notices at his favorite Indian restaurant that the wait is quite young, and he eventually inquires and finds out this kid was kidnapped, like trafficked from India to come and work on a farm in California, and was working as a waiter at night. And his eyes just opened. It started him on a whole journey where he realized like how rampant the slave trade is. And often the threads we're wearing are made by slaves who've been working in cotton fields for how many hours a day. And I think it's creating awareness and opening eyes to the issues of social justice, where if we call ourselves professing Christians, we need to be aware of these things that are around us. And also being aware of the conveniences that we enjoy, like having our food delivered to our house and having shops that are open 24/7. It's keeping other people enslaved. And I think the Sabbath is, as I say, a resistance to that narrative. And the culture that we're in.
But yeah, we just get sucked in. It's like a vacuum. It's like this never-ending vacuum. I mean, one of the things he says, atheism hasn't replaced cultural Christianity, shopping has. You know? For a lot of people, things aren't just things, they're identities.
Yeah. It comes back to that third discipline of simplicity and just realizing what I have in my house. Is it useful or is it beautiful? Like, those should be your lens through whether you keep stuff in your house or not. I was like, And, you know, I don't know if you've watched Marie Kondo. She's this little Japanese lady who wrote a book on the beauty of simplifying things. And she is a lady, she's got a show that you call her and she'll come into your crazy, disorganized house and just sort it out. And the question she asks the person of every object and item of clothing or stuff in their house is, does it spark joy? And if it doesn't spark joy for you, toss it, like get rid of it, you don't need it. But he says, like, actually to Marie Kondo, your house is kind of the antithesis of simplicity, because it implies that you have more than you need anyway, because we shouldn't have that much stuff that we need Marie Kondo to come and sort out our houses. But and having moved this previous weekend, like I'm thinking minimalism is the way to go. because after 4 truck roads, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got too much rubbish, we need to get rid of it. And I think it's not so much about the sorting out your house and organizing your cupboards. It's about realizing, like, actually you can have some margin and you can be generous. Not spending your money on stuff that actually isn't that useful. And rather reflecting, I mean, it's Jesus that says, it's wise as the man who uses his money to win friends. Like, are we using the resources we have to win people over to the kingdom? Like, I think that for me is the kind of takeaway of simplifying your life. Like, can we get it to a place where we've got enough margin and that we're not wasting our money on stuff that's really not that useful?
I mean, he also says, for a lot of people, things are not just things, they're identities. And I think that's, I mean, northern suburbs of Joburg, you know, it's where we live. It's like the car you drive, how your house looks, whatever, you know, the size of your pool, or I don't know, who knows. But like, they become, if people lose that, they feel like they've lost who they are, you know? And yet Jesus connects those things to worry, money and stuff. He are directly, in Jesus' words, connected to worry. And man, if we just simplifying, it's literally just cutting off things that are pulling on you, like this weighing you down.
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
Yeah.
And then the final practice that he talks about is just slowing, and I think that's really just coming against the spirit of speed in our lives, like just being purposeful to walk slowly. And that one he spoke about, for me, it's funny because when I walk at my normal pace, it's faster than my wife's pace, just because by virtue of my stride.
Yes.
But he talks about going for a walk with his mentor, and they didn't have anywhere to go, they didn't have anywhere to be, but he was getting frustrated with the pace that his mentor was walking. It's like, dude, can you pick it up? And then he's like, what am I doing? Like, and you realize, like, Jesus never ran. He never ran anywhere. He just walked.
Yeah.
There's a book that he references, I think it's called the 3 mile per hour gospel, and it's just realizing, like, we don't see Jesus running from one town to the next. He walked with his disciples. And 3 miles per hour is kind of this, what he describes as the speed of love. You know, we don't see Jesus running. And I think it's really just a challenge to look at what you do in your everyday life and try and slow it down. Like, practically, are you the guy who's getting to the shop and looking at the queues and going, which one's the shortest? Like, oh, this one look like I'm gonna get in there. Or you get to the toll gates and you're like, I'm changing lanes to get to, like, it just says, maybe welcome some interruptions in your life. Welcome the longer queue. Welcome the distraction, well, not the distraction, the interruption that causes you to have to slow down. I think it's a challenge living in Joburg and just in modern day culture, where everybody wants to get it done faster. And there's no reason to always have to speed up your life. Like we think faster is better, but sometimes it's not. And he also talks about like the connotations of slow. Like if you're at school, like the slow kid was always the kid who was struggling. Like there's so much negative connotation with slow, and I think we need to start reframing it and changing the connotations to slow to actually being a positive. Because it was always fast food. Now there's this whole move towards slow food and enjoying your meals and taking time to cook your own meals. And it's simple practices. And he goes on after this chapter to talk about his practices, his rules for life, his things that when you look at it kind of just a light reading, well, that's a bit legalistic, but actually it's disciplines that he's put in place to try and work this thing out. And some of them are quite challenging, some of them look like quite fun, and it's a guide that you can either take or leave and see how it affects you.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about being interrupted and those kind of things is if you are in the long line, do you take out your phone and try to fill up that time straight away? Or are you actually going to embrace the opportunity to just be?
Yeah,
you know?
That's it.
And I think, so I had the opportunity to go to his house, John Mark's house.
Yes.
And they don't have a TV. It's not a big fancy house. It's a cool house, but it's small. They don't have lots of things. Very minimalistic. Kind of take your shoes off outside the door before you walk in, kind of thing. And then, at that stage, I doubt he's changed it, but he didn't have a car, so he would cycle everywhere. It's just everything. It's intentional slowing down. It's intentional time to stop, to think, to look around, to breathe,
sharing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna change? I guess that's what this book leaves us with.
Yeah.
What are you gonna change?
That's it. It's guys, I would not recommend this book if you don't want to change, because it will force you to have to ask some tough questions and give some difficult answers. But the end of it, I think, in summary, is that your life will slow down. Things will become a lot simpler, but the end result is an abundant life, and a life that's sustainable, and a life that's going to count. I think the world's and advertising will try and tell you, push harder, go faster, get more. But I love what John Mark does with these kids. He's like, hey guys, when they see an advert, let's chat about the lie that was coming out of this ad.
I love that.
Like,
I love that.
What was the lie that you're going to be like the Nordic family driving their Volvo in the fjords of Norway and experiencing that? Like, no, you're not. If you drive a Volvo, you're going to be
stuck in traffic.
Stuck in traffic with a big debt to pay. Like, let's be honest. I think it's a great book for just being real and getting those practical disciplines of what Jesus did in your life. And he leaves you with that challenge in his parting words, is like that 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 10 and 11 passage is like, brothers, make it your ambition to live a quiet life. Like, don't listen to the noise, don't fall for the lies. Like, come back to a place of simple, quiet, slow down life where you can actually hear what the Father's saying and live a quiet life.
Yeah. So I'll leave us with one last little nugget from the book. It says, we achieve inner peace when our schedules are aligned with our values. It's those kind of nuggets that are spread throughout this book. So enjoy it, live it, more importantly, and it's a cracker. We recommend it highly.
Thanks.